I always like to chat for a minute just to kind of get a conversational rhythm down before jumping into the interview. So,
Yeah, so it's not awkward.
yeah, you're East Coast, if I remember correctly.
I am, in Canada. So up
Okay.
into the east. You're in like Champaign, Illinois, I saw, right?
Right.
Are you still there?
Yeah. Central part of the country. Originally from Minnesota for almost my whole life, but we moved here
Oh,
a year
cool.
ago. So it's a weird area to live. The University of Illinois is here, so they've got
Yeah.
about 42,000 students. So when school's
Oh
in
my
session,
God.
there's like 100,000 people here, and when
Yeah.
school's not in session, it drops significantly. But it's really bizarre because it's like you're in a farm town. So it's 100,000 people, but once you get outside of town, there's nothing but fields for miles and miles.
It's so funny you mention that because there are three universities in this town too, and when school isn't in session, so between the months of May, June, July, August, there's like it's like a ghost. You can get a table at a coffee shop
Right.
because people aren't just working on their laptops there for hours on end. And but there are three of them. There's like a military school, there's Queen's University, and then there's a college here. And the population doubles, and so you see the beautiful rhythms over time. It's kind of nice to observe.
Are you originally from Canada, or why Canada?
Yeah. Well, when the president. No, I'm just kidding.
You were
Yeah,
one of
that's
those few who vowed that if Trump got elected, you were going to move, and you just up and moved.
Yeah, and I actually did move. No, I've lived in Canada all my life. I don't think that'll ever change. I just love, I just love everything about the country. But the weird part now is, as you can probably imagine, most of my work is U.S. based, and
Right.
so it's like a weird tax implication because 80% of my income comes from the United States. My publishing deals are with, Penguin in New York, and so everything comes from the U.S. But I'm just like sitting here in like this small town in Canada and flying out every week or two to do talks and stuff. But yeah, it's nice. I don't think that'll change because it's a nice the systems in Canada. I like better than the ones in the U.S. The healthcare system, the social system, the cultural systems, that sort of thing. It's just kind of like maybe these are my liberal roots showing, but
Sure.
but it's just kind of nice. It's a friendly place in
Sure.
more ways than just the people.
I'm curious, like why like how did I'll ask. I actually have a question about this in the interview, but why for the previous book, like why productivity? Was this more to help yourself get more productive, or did you just wake up one day in elementary school and say, "Hey, I'm going to be a productivity expert"?
Honestly, it's like no, I didn't set out to
That
become
wasn't
an
even a thing
expert.
back then, so
That's something that people call me. I don't really consider myself an expert. I just consider myself somebody that has more questions than what he started with.
right.
Yeah, no, it's always been like a curiosity, honestly. And I feel it's kind of like a story point at this point, like just something I've said so often that like I believe is true. But when I look back, like I really do have this curiosity. Looking at the books I read, even back in high school, looking at the websites I visited, it was all productivity related, and so is that burning, just like weird nerd curiosity. Like everybody's got their thing, and that's always been my thing.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I liked how self-disclosing you were in the book, talking about how after your previous book, you entered into this phase of you suddenly weren't very productive and realized you were wasting
Yeah.
a lot a lot of time. I was like, great, if the productivity expert doesn't stay productive, we're all doomed.
Yeah, no, like any like quote unquote expert that pretends to be productive or working 100%, they're just bullshitting.
I know.
Like it's just but whenever I hear somebody like say that, I think, okay, screw you. Like you're just lying. You're just like bolstering your own ego. You're afraid to be vulnerable in who you are, which makes people connect with your work more.
Right.
All just to aggrandize yourself. It actually really bugs me. Because not many folks have connected as many ideas around the topic of productivity as I have. Like, and I don't say that in a way to bolster myself. I say that in a way just because I've spent the last 10 years looking at this. So you would hope that would be the case. And if somebody who is in the same position, that nobody has it all figured out. And the
Right.
same is true with like the happiness experts I know. The like whatever somebody's an expert on, they don't follow their advice 100% of the time. But they, when you're honest about when you do, it makes people connect with you more. I feel.
Right. Well, and all you have to be an expert is probably know more about the other guy. I work in the Christian
Yeah.
publishing space, so I work with hundreds of authors every year, and I've interviewed tons of authors through the years. And I think one of the biggest challenges an author faces when they put out a book is then people expect that they're going to live out this message that they put out
Mhm.
perfectly because they are the example of.
Yeah.
You've told me to go therefore and do likewise, so I hope I kind of hope you're doing the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, and the other thing about we could put this in the interview if you're recording, but like the other fascinating thing is that everybody comes to you because they consider you to be an expert,
Right.
but not just about the topic that you wrote a book about,
Everything.
but about other topics as well. And so, like, people will ask me like questions about like I don't know, like writing, for example. It's like I don't know how to write. Like I just kind of like I let my passion drive it, and then I have a few editors that I work with that clean up a lot of the ideas that I've written
Right.
down, hopefully not too much, but like it's yeah, people expect you to be an expert about most things just because you have a book. It's a
Hmm.
fascinating phenomenon. There's something unique about having a book that isn't true if you have a record out, or you have a big job, or whatever it is. Like there's something about like a book that casts that halo effect almost.
Right. You're
Yeah.
suddenly this special elite super smart person who must know everything because you wrote a
Yeah.
book. Well, and the
Yeah.
interesting thing I think about asking somebody to tell you how to be a better writer is you can get tips from people, but I've discovered every author has their own process and how everybody gets into a creative flow is different. And
Yeah.
so what works for you isn't necessarily going to work for the next person.
I know some people who write 1 hour every day or half an hour every day, and they write books.
Hmm.
And I know some people who write 5 hours every day and they write books. And I look at the end product and I think the books aren't that better, like
No.
what one process or another. It's having the ideas in the first place that make the book, not the process through which you express them. Yeah.
And one of the things I appreciate about what you're doing in Hyperfocus is the first half you're helping people learn how to focus better, but then the fact that you go to the other side with scatter focus and teach them how to actually tap into being creative, which
Yeah.
you can be as focused as you want, but if you can't actually have enough mental space to be creative and start thinking out of the box, you're just going to get a lot. You're going to get a lot of tasks done when you're hyper focused, but I feel like you're not going to push beyond a certain barrier unless you give your brain the space to think, which most productivity themed books don't do that. So that was definitely a welcome surprise.
Yeah, that was like because like you don't think about your goals when you're focusing. You think
Right.
about your goals 14 times as much when you're unfocusing. And so when you combine those two, that's where the magic happens, I think. Is this
Mm.
the interview? Are you
No,
recording?
no.
We should put this. Oh, okay.
Well, I am technically recording
This-
this, but
okay, yeah. You should put this in. It's like casual. It's a casual start to the
we'll have the
conversation.
we'll have the pre-show and then we'll get into the
Yeah,
opening. No, that's
yeah,
good.
we'll like ease into this one. You like that idea or no?
Yeah, that's
You want
fine.
to do an official? What's that?
Oh, I'll still read through the opening, but I'll I'll
Okay.
I'll, I'll work it in. I'll
Yeah. Why don't you tackle the opening so people know who the heck I am?
Well, a couple practical questions just so I make
Oh yeah,
sure. At the end, I'll always ask about website. I'm assuming you're going to point us to hyperfocusbook.com.
sure. Yeah, or my blog, or yeah, whatever.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Let's jump into the opening here, and we'll just get into the interview, and I'll edit it up so we work in the casual conversation too, just to make it fun.
All right. Sweet.
All right. Well,
Yeah,
wait.
because it's nice. Like I was with a photographer the other day. He was shooting me. I always love that he was shooting me.
Yeah,
But
a word with multiple
everybody
meanings.
says it. Everybody says it as if it's like a totally normal
Normal.
thing to
Yeah,
say.
just hanging
But
out
yeah,
and some dude's taking pictures of me. Normal day in the
he
life.
was he was shooting me. Like with his camera. But but anyway, what he did when we got started was he pretended to set up his camera. So he was just like kind of putting his lens on and stuff, and he said, "Oh, just have a seat over there." And then what he did, he said, "Oh, that's great like that. Let me take a few shots of you like that." And he told me afterward that he does this with every single person that he
Right.
photographs, because when somebody gets into the when he comes to somebody's office, they're all rigid, they're like professional, they're ready to smile or have this serious look on their face, and they're not that casual. And so what he does is he does that. He pretends to set up, and then he waits until somebody has a chance to relax. He's personable, so he chats with them a little bit, and then he just starts taking pictures. And then those are more often than not the stuff that he uses.
Right.
And so I feel like for an interview, like this is like the true character of a person,
Oh
where
yeah.
they're not like they don't have their talking points in front of them, or not talking, but the things that they usually say, they're just kind of like disarmed, they're casual. You get to see who's like actually kind of rude and who's more nice. And it's like a fun way to do things, I feel.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've definitely through the years discovered having a brief conversation early on helps a lot.
Mhm.
Or if it's somebody I've talked to multiple times, it's just so much easier that second or third time.
Yeah.
The thing I've really experimented with in the past year, so just because the industry I'm in, I've interviewed several hundred Christian authors, and that's the publishing space I work in. And then
Yeah.
I've really shifted into like personal development and
Mm.
kind of marketing because I do marketing, and so
Yeah.
been a fascinating transition to switch into more business oriented authors where
Hmm.
it's not like the Christian authors. I kind of know what to expect personality wise. They're going to tend to put on a good face and be nice, and not that people are mean, but just it's
Yeah.
been intriguing to see the differences in personality and how certain depending on where people are at, how like driven they are, and just
Hmm.
it's just a different experience. And some of that I think is me getting my head in the game right for those different sorts of interviews because
Yeah.
it's not a high comfort point yet, but it's getting there. Anyhow, just very,
Yeah.
it's been fascinating to talk to authors who just are very different from the majority of the authors I've talked to in the past few years.
What would you say like the key differences between?
I think part of it too is I probably have to work a little bit harder in preparing in the sense that
Mm.
I've got like an interview format down pat for like a Christian book author interview because I've done so many of them and it's an industry that I know inside and out. So I just have an extremely high comfort level. And so
Yeah.
even if the interview goes off the rails, I know enough insider language and different things that I can correct course or keep it moving and just kind of use those
Mm.
cliche phrases and it just works. Versus you bring on a Harvard Business School professor to talk about their research. I probably have had to do a bit more prep time to, because
Yeah.
I'm not an expert. So anyway, it's just some of
Yeah.
it's, yeah, just I don't always know the insider baseball language enough. Sometimes I
Mhm.
don't know, just just kind of
Yeah, that's a curious
something
idea.
something I've been observing as I've been walking through this the past year. So
It's funny you've made the jump from the Christian publishing space to the productivity space, because I've noticed that with my like my own audience, it's like no joke. There are so many folks in that space,
hmm
Christian people who want to better themselves,
right,
and so whenever I see like somebody on Twitter mention it, often if I'm bored or something, I'll dig into their page and see what else they tweet about. And so often it's the case that they're in that space of
right,
they identify as Christian, they want to better themselves, and so it's such a fascinating audience that I honestly didn't expect would happen. I didn't even consider that. I thought it would be all just like hyper driven people who want to just get more done every day, but it's like a lot of more people who's like, okay, we have one life, might as well
right,
live it well, and
right.
let's do this.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure you've probably bumped into Michael Hyatt's books at some point. I would imagine you've
Yeah.
seen. I mean, Michael Hyatt used to be the CEO of Thomas Nelson, which is a Christian publisher. So I mean, in the Christian
Mhm.
publishing space, he's kind of paved the way for a lot of productivity books. And
Oh,
I
that's
felt like kind of
good.
introduced that into our space a bit. I mean,
Hmm.
for me, I'm always looking to learn from people who are different than me or have had a different. Like, I want to know how'd you grow up? What was your background? What kind of makes you tick? Because it's really interesting to me. But I
Yeah.
also know that even though I can read a lot of inspirational material from the space I work in, we don't have all there is to say about productivity or
No.
self-improvement or getting healthy. And so, I mean, I have to fish in different barrels, so to speak, to get what I want if I want to kind of go where I'd like to go. And so, yeah,
Yeah,
that's what brought me
that's
here.
awesome.
So, well, let's get through the opening, because otherwise I'll just keep talking, and then we can just randomly go wherever the conversation leads us. How's that?
Yeah. Yeah, I like it's casual. Like
Yep.
that's why I listen to podcasts myself, is like just to hear if you guys chatting about a topic that I'm curious about. So I feel folks will, dig
Yeah.
it.
Well,
Hopefully.
and
Maybe they'll
people,
hate it and they've
yeah,
already tuned out.
we'll get letters. No, but that's
Yeah,
and
we
that's
will.
I find those are some of the best episodes. Is if it's just two guys talking, people really just enjoy the banter and listening in, and so
Yeah,
we'll make that happen. All right, officially, here's the opening.
officially.
It's time
Yeah.
for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, digging into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is Chris Bailey, and we're going to be discussing his new book, Hyperfocus: How to Be More Productive in a World of Distraction. Chris, thanks for joining us on today's show.
Thank you, Shaun Tabatt. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I feel like we've already conducted half the interview because we had a really good
Yeah.
pre-show banter going,
Yeah.
which you've talked me
Now we
into. You've talked me into actually including that in the
Yeah.
show, which I don't normally do, but you're stretching me. I like it.
Yeah, it's nice because it's more casual. Like you get to hear what somebody's actually like, and I noticed this in myself because around book publication time, there's always a lot of interviews to do,
Right.
and I notice that I get into that interview mode, and so there's the pre-show banter, and then you hit record, and then the conversation changes a little bit. It's like I put on a suit and tie almost, and I have a stiffer posture, and so it's nice to be a bit more casual because I feel that's why people listen to podcasts. People don't want to listen to like a news broadcast where a man in a suit and a lady in a dress just speak at you. They want to hear a conversation about something that they love, and so yeah, it's fun to include that stuff in. And maybe I said some things I'll regret, and that makes it more fun too. So
Yeah.
people get to know who I really am.
Yes, the real expose will be in the pre-interview banter, so be sure to listen to that, folks.
Yeah, a
Uh,
tell all.
yes. Well, I always like to kick off every interview with what you might think of as the author's origin story. So if you had to give us kind of that elevator pitch version of just a few things we need to know about you, your background, what makes you tick, what drives you, what are
Yeah.
those things?
Yeah, so I'm a big nerd about a lot of different topics. Mechanical keyboards. I'm really into knitting as well, but productivity is a passion of mine. Some people have normal passions, but for me, it's always been, accomplishing what we set out to do. There are some people who talk about doing things, and then there are other people who actually do things and accomplish what they set out to do. And so I've always been curious what separates those two groups of people. And I remember way back in high school now, reading blogs and books about this weird curiosity of personal productivity and thinking, okay, like I only have so much time every day. Why not create more time for myself by getting all this schoolwork done in a smaller chunk of time? So I have more time to be lazy and do what I want and invest in my skills and learn how to code and live a more meaningful life. I feel when a lot of people hear the word productivity, what comes to mind is something that feels so cold and corporate and all about this efficiency and effectiveness, whatever the heck those things actually mean. Different people will tell you different definitions of words we all use. But I just think it means accomplishing what we set out to do. And so that's always been my curiosity. It led me through university where I worked full-time jobs while getting good grades and graduating with a few full-time job offers. But then I decided to decline the jobs and devote a year of my life to diving deep into this topic and this curiosity. I ran experiments on myself. I interviewed the greats. I read over as much academic research about the topic as I could. That turned into a book deal, which turned into the opportunity to write this second book, Hyperfocus. The first one was called The Productivity Project. And I feel like I feel so grateful every single day. I feel like the luckiest person in the world that I took the chance. And it turned out like it could have easily gone the other way, I think. But luckily, this calling has turned into a career.
Well, let's back up for a minute and talk about your fascination with mechanical keyboards. What is that
Oh,
all about? I'm super curious because I've recently switched and gone through a range of different kind of gaming keyboards to use in my office,
yeah.
which have that kind of old school tactile clicky feel, and it's kind of yeah, you can hear mine too. It's a welcome shift from the soft Mac keyboard. So
Oh,
what's that about?
man.
Where'd that come from?
Have you ever played the piano?
Yeah,
Do you play the piano
no, not
currently? Oh,
no, I
you've
don't.
played a piano. I
Yep,
feel
yep.
most people have played a piano. Like most people haven't played a harp, but most people have played a piano. And there's kind of different types of these keyboard type pianos. There's the one where it has kind of the keyboard like switches where you press down, you don't feel much weight, and you're like triggering some software program to play a MIDI or MP3 file through the speakers on that keyboard, and it feels like you're kind of disconnected from the experience. And then there's the grand piano where when you sit down in front of it, you may not have any clue how to play the thing, but you feel the piano. There's significance with every key that you press down on. You feel the weight. You can feel the weight inside of the piano hitting the string because it's a string instrument, which reverberates around the room, and you're connected with that experience of playing the piano. I would make, and I'm a bit of a nerd about this stuff as you can tell, but I would make a similar connection between the jump where you go from mushing down on a regular keyboard that's on your laptop or connected to it with the membrane type switches where you essentially hit a little bit of rubber and that connects to switches together, which sends a signal to your computer, to the mechanical keyboards, which have this beautiful switch inside where when you press down on it, it actuates at a certain point. There's a different actuation force versus depending on what type of key switch that you have. There's many different types of key switches. I'm a big fan of cherry browns. Think brown like chocolate, very luxurious, and it's a similar jump. Writing feels more significant. Writing feels more important. I've written 2 books on mechanical keyboards. The first one was around 80,000 words. This one's around 70,000 words, and I wouldn't want it any other way. It just feels like there's significance, and it's a more tactile experience where you feel more connected with what you're writing. Can you
Yeah.
tell I'm into mechanical keyboards?
I can sense the excitement level in your voice as you're talking about it. But that is true. It does give a very different experience. And
Yeah.
as somebody who like I learned to type on an Apple IIe, which had
Oh man, the
the epic
beautiful switches in there.
clicky
Yeah.
keyboard, and yeah, there is just something that kind of feels like I'm home again on one of these keyboards that has the right pressure and the
Yeah.
keys come up. And so yeah, I'm with you. Mechanical keyboards all the way.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people who still buy these Apple II keyboards. John Gruber is a writer in the Apple space. He has like one of these old keyboards that it has like the analog interface. So you have to get like something to convert it to USB even so that you can plug it into a modern day laptop. But what I'd recommend to people is you can buy these little like tester switches where it'll have the different types of mechanical keyboard switches on it. So, Cherry is the company that makes most of these switches. Cherry Blues and Cherry Browns are the most common ones. And so get the little tester thing, and it'll have one of each key on it. It'll have cherry blues, browns, greens, clears, blacks, and clears, and test them out. I really think you'll dig it.
Well, and for those of you listening who want to go deeper down this particular rabbit hole, I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. So I'll include a
Yeah.
link to the current keyboard I'm using, and yeah, we'll link to some of the other things that Chris is referring to as well. Randomly off the top of my head,
Yeah.
you're in Canada, I'm here in the States. When it comes to productivity and focus and distraction, because we're just both here in the West, is it kind of the same, or is there a difference between where you are and where I'm at least with what you observe around you?
That's a really curious question. One of my favorite things to do whenever I travel somewhere, I wrote a lot of this book in diners because it's, if you go to a coffee shop and write, you kind of, look at everybody, but everybody's just on their laptop. Like in a coffee shop, you get, or in a diner rather, you get to really observe what people are like because people are always with one another. They're sharing this experience, whether they're having breakfast or lunch, and you get to see people like look at their phones and flip them face down on the table. You get to see people converse or like just become immersed in a conversation with somebody. And I would say that this is one of my favorite things to do over the course of writing the book, was to observe how people manage their attention whenever I'm anywhere really. And honestly, I haven't really noticed a big difference. The funny thing about traveling, because I do a lot of traveling now, is when you went to different places, and it's kind of a sad note, but you went to, say, Rome, and you got to take in the culture and the coffee shop scene where everybody's conversing in coffee shops and talking to one another. You went to Paris, and you saw kind of the more free flowing culture there. You went down to the South, and you get to see the more conservative culture. You went to L.A. or San Francisco, you get to see the more free form culture there too. But now everybody's just kind of looking at their phones. And it's quite sad because I think we're missing that big part of ourselves where we're looking downward at our phone instead of outward with other people. And this was an idea that came up frequently over the course of writing the book. And the main point that I want to get across in it is that the state of our attention is what determines the state of our lives. And so if we're distracted in each moment, these moments build up, they accumulate day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, to create a life that feels like we're distracted and like we feel overwhelmed because our attention has that quality in each moment. And I would say that the quality of attention is geographically independent. We all kind of fall victim to these distractions, and without really realizing the costs that they have, not only on the personal level but also on that connection level, and frankly the empathy level. I read a study the other day saying that younger folks, so millennials, are about 40% less empathetic than they used to be. And I would wager a guess that this is because of technology, that we connect with our phones instead of with each other. In the diner, people flip their phones face down on the table. But the research shows that when our phone is face down, we still check it every 3 to 5 minutes. And this has been shown to interfere with our relationship quality and our perceived level of connection with whomever that we're with. And so I would present that point. Things don't necessarily differ from city to city, from country to country. They do on some level, but I think we need to look outward instead of downward to reclaim that attention when it matters so much.
Well, and I travel a lot for work as well, and sometimes
What have you noticed?
I end up in Atlanta a lot. I don't know why. I guess it's just for where I live in the country. It's my connecting airport. I
Georgia.
think I've been there at least between 50 to
Georgia.
60 times in the last decade, which I just
Wow.
got a favorite restaurant and all. But sometimes
In
I'll
the
just,
airport.
yeah, in the airport. Cafe Intermezzo, Concourse B. On the map, it's known
Hey,
as Buckhead Books, but it is a
that's where it's
funky
at.
little cafe with a bookstore in it. So really, coffee,
Huh.
books, food. What more do you need?
In the airport, there's a bookstore and a coffee shop.
Yes, that's a
How big
restaurant.
is this airport, and how cheap is the retail space that you can have one
Oh,
of
I have
these
no
things?
idea it's probably pretty expensive, but the Atlanta
Yeah.
airport's huge. I mean, it's one of the biggest hubs here in the States, largest Delta hub, I believe. So,
Mm.
yeah, I'll be there in a few days. It's like my second home. But
I will see
sometimes
it.
when I'm wandering through that airport, I'll just put my phone away and just kind of watch people, and like almost
Yeah.
nobody is paying attention to anything. Like everybody's staring at their phone or just. And I realize it's an airport and people are rushed and they're trying to get to a gate and all, but
Yeah.
whether it's at the airport or just like 2 years ago, and I feel like it's gotten worse now, or whenever it was that Pokemon Go first came out. Like we were in Edina, Minnesota, my family and I, at this restaurant, and the whole outside of this restaurant is all glass. and you can look down on this park with like a canal and walkways, and it's all pretty. And there were about, I don't know, 100 to 150 people wandering through this park in a pretty small area. But the majority of them were all staring at their phones playing Pokemon
Mhm.
Go. It was really hilarious to observe like all these large groups of people together, but not actually interacting with each other or not talking to each other. And yeah, I mean, it's just yeah,
Mhm.
we're always fairly in a state of distraction at this point. I mean, it's I've been amazed at
Yeah.
how little we're paying attention, whether it's at home with like kids on their devices and parents on devices, or just about anywhere you go, or even people driving down the street. I mean, it's horrifying to be on the freeway and seeing people
Oh, yeah.
staring at their
Yeah.
phones while they're driving 75 miles an hour.
And the science behind that is actually quite fascinating. There's this kind of I like to think of it as a bias toward distraction that we have in our mind, and it's because our mind rewards us for each new and novel thing at which we direct our attention. And so each time we focus on something that's new and novel, our brain actually releases a hit of dopamine, the one of the main pleasure chemicals of our brain, for each new and novel thing that we focus on. And so we wake up and then we check our phone and we see that we got 2 emails overnight. We go to our email, we get a hit of dopamine. We go to Instagram, we get a hit of dopamine. We check the news, we get a hit of dopamine. We bounce over to another app that we love, we get another hit of dopamine. We play a quick game, we get a hit of dopamine. We focus on the person that we're married to that's next to us, we get a hit of dopamine. We focus on something else, we get a hit of it. So every time we switch between things, we get a hit of dopamine. And because our mind gravitates to anything that's pleasurable or threatening, the most pleasurable and threatening things aren't other people often. They're our phone. Nothing feels in the moment more threatening than a news alert that comes in. Nothing feels more pleasurable than a Facebook notification when we're tagged in a great photo of us. And so we have this bias toward distraction. But because of this, there's so much dopamine coursing through our mind. The research shows that when we work in front of a computer, especially, we only focus on one thing for 40 seconds before we switch to doing something else, which is kind of remarkable. And once we notice this in ourselves, it's kind of hard to go back to working the same way. But I think the bigger idea here is that we're so stimulated by default because we get accustomed to whatever level of stimulation we're in, to whatever level of dopamine is coursing through our mind. And so this leads us to feel phantom vibrations in our leg when we think our phone is vibrating, when really, it's just that phantom vibration where we need that stimulation. This leads us to focus on people less. It leads us to look downward and switch between Pokemon Go and 3 other apps when we're in the park instead of connecting with the other people that we're with. I think this level of stimulation, one of the best things that we can do for our attention is to become less stimulated. Putting our phone on airplane mode or enabling the grayscale mode on our phone, which is, if you go in the settings app of your phone, you're going to make your phone screen black and white through this mode called grayscale. GRAY scale. And it's a great way to make it less stimulating because the world is in color, but your phone won't be. And so I think this is the key behind all of these things is, we it isn't necessarily our fault. And so if you find that maybe you switch between things every 40 seconds, don't be too hard on yourself because it's the way your mind is wired. You're wired to pay attention to anything that's pleasurable, threatening, and especially novel with that distraction and novelty bias. But it's so critical that we make a deliberate effort to adjust downward into a state of lower stimulation because it can be so costly, even walking through an airport, bumping into mailboxes and stuff. Now, not noticing the coffee shop bookstore that Shaun's in.
Yes, that would be a tragedy to miss out on a coffee shop bookstore. It's pretty much my happy place.
Yeah.
I suspect that may be what I encounter in heaven, some kind of a coffee shop bookstore. So we'll, we'll
Heaven is just one giant coffee
one,
shop bookstore
one
with
day.
like a ton of cats, probably, or
Well,
at least my heaven.
hopefully not cats. I don't know. I might prefer dogs over cats, but maybe we'll save that. Although I have a dog and a
Yeah.
cat, so we'll save that
Oh,
for.
so you do love one more than the other.
Well, I've got 9 kids, so some kids like cats, some like dogs. We gotta have a
Okay.
little of both.
Everybody's had. What are the dogs and cats' names?
The dog is named Oliver. Oliver's about a 7-year-old golden doodle who's about 45 pounds, but would still love to be a lap dog. And then we have, I don't know what kind of cat we have. The cat,
Oh, man, you're so disconnected
I
from this
know
cat.
it's my son's cat. The cat's named Starfire, and
Starfire. Wow, that
Starfire
sounds
is,
like it was named by your son.
yeah, definitely. And Starfire, in my opinion, is all kinds of evil as far as the mischief he gets into. But
Mhm.
most of the time, he's a fairly lovable animal. So yeah. How about you? You have an affinity for cats, apparently.
I do, but my fiance is allergic, so that is it's out of the question, unfortunately. We do have an affinity for turtles, though. We have a turtle. She is basking on her rock right now. She's looking at me kind of creepily, but she's on her rock under her heat lamp. Her name is Edward because you can't tell the gender of a turtle when you first get them. And so we thought, it looks like a male, I guess, because turtles have that kind of masculine vibe to them, I guess. I don't really know what we were thinking. And so we chose Edward instead of a unisex name, but Edward is a lady turtle, and she is about 6 or 7 years old, and she will probably outlive us both.
Well, when it comes to turtles, do they take a lot of maintenance? Like, how long can you leave a turtle
No!
on its own?
This is the wonderful thing about a turtle that nobody talks about because Arden and I travel quite a bit. I travel every week or two to give keynotes and stuff. And Arden runs a lot of development projects in Zimbabwe while she's doing her PhD. She's frankly more productive than I am, so you should have her on the show as well. Maybe instead of me, maybe just cancel this episode and she can fill in. But so we travel quite a bit, but turns out, and I didn't believe Arden when she told me this, but it turns out that turtles only need to eat every week or two. And so I thought, oh, there's no way this is the case. This thing is going to starve. I was secretly feeding it. And, then there's a lot of food left over in the tank, and she got like all lazy and stuff. And so I Googled it. And yeah, it turns out that red-eared sliders only need to eat every week or two. So it's a beautiful pet if you travel quite a bit.
Wow, learn something new on every single episode. I didn't know that a turtle was the key pet thing that was missing from my life, but
Yeah.
I'm sure my kids would be open to the idea of having a turtle. Not so sure if my wife will be open to that, but
Very low maintenance. The biggest maintenance thing is just cleaning the tank.
good to
Yeah.
know. I would say turtles are probably better than fish. I've not had a good history with
Yeah.
fish. Fish just I've flushed a lot of them down the toilet, sadly. Not been
Fish
a
just kind of like flop around too, you know? They just kind of like they're just kind of there. I don't mean to bash on fish. I'm sure there are some fish lovers that are listening to the show, but I've never been satisfied with a fish.
well, cats, turtles. Sounds like those are the pets of choice, folks. So
Yes, yes.
good luck if you're in the market for a pet. We've given you some reasons why
Godspeed.
you might want to go in some new directions there. Good luck
Oh,
with
we can connect this to productivity. There was a there was one study I encountered over the course of writing this book. It didn't make the book, but it'll make the podcast, where they showed people pictures of cute baby animals and then tested their ability to focus. And they found that people who looked at pictures of cute baby animals, regardless of whether it's a turtle, a cat, a dog, they were able to better focus after looking at the animals than people who looked at say human babies or other satisfying pictures. And so if you're looking for a little focus boost, it won't help you a ton, but it will it will make you more focused on whether mental or physical things, something that's mental and physical. We just invented a word, mentical, basically Shakespeare here. But yeah, if you're looking for a little break instead of just checking Instagram and getting that stimulation level up, look at some pictures of cats or dogs, whatever your preference is. It'll help you.
So, that greatly encourages me because I manage a team of female millennials. That is my crew. I'm the 40-year-old Gen Xer guy, and my whole team of young ladies. So the youngest of them, which are not much older than my oldest daughter, actually, but they send me a lot of animal-themed memes throughout the day. So I take great comfort in that because apparently
Yeah.
them sending me those is not only boosting my, but also boosting their productivity at the same time.
Oh yeah, the more dank memes, the merrier. And if you can print off some, get some nice pictures of cats around the office, you'll find your team is so much more productive. I guarantee it.
Well, we'll try that out next time I'm in the office. There, we'll put up some more pictures of cats in my office and see if it helps us be more productive. I like that.
I love it. I love
I love all the value adds, special things I didn't know we were going to get out of this
it.
conversation this morning.
Name a thing, and I'll connect it to the productivity. I guarantee you.
All right. What about any productivity things related to horses? I have a picture of a horse in my office here right now. So
Mm. Horses, not that I can think. Well, if you're on the horse and getting some physical activity is a great way to bolster your attention. I think this is something that people miss when it comes to our attention. Is that when you think of it as just like focusing or not, you miss the bigger picture. And this is something that people miss with productivity in general. Is it's not like, okay, I have to be so focused. I have to manage my time like a wizard, a time wizard. But it's more holistic than that. When you kind of zoom out from productivity and you define it as accomplishing what you intend to do, then you kind of have this more holistic approach where everything sort of contributes to whether or not you achieve an intention. Getting some physical activity on a horse is a wonderful strategy for doing that, and letting your mind wander a little bit when you're riding. It's a wonderful rhythm. You get it. But the fascinating thing about mind wandering is that when your mind is wandering, it wanders to some fascinating places. There's that quote from J.R.R. Tolkien where he said that not all those who wander are lost. And whether you're wandering around on a horse or just letting your mind wander when you're taking a shower, the fascinating thing about this mind wandering mode, your best ideas, they never strike you when you're focusing on something. They strike when you're taking a shower. They strike when you're unfocused, when your mind is wandering, when you're working, looking at the beautiful picture that's in your environment, when it's wandering when you're riding the horse. And so we actually think about our goals 14 times as much when our mind is wandering versus when we're focused on something. And so it's unfocusing on things that allows us to set intentions for what we want to focus on in the first place. And so if you find that that you're that you're working on this autopilot mode, you probably need to unfocus more often. And this is kind of a thing that I didn't expect in writing this book. Is I thought, okay, I'm going to write the ultimate book on how we can focus all day. But it turns out that focusing on stuff all day long is one of the worst things that you can do for your productivity, because you don't have enough energy to focus on things. You expend too much mental energy to force yourself to focus, and then you find you need to recharge because your attention stops working in the way that you want it to. You'll find that your mind wanders a bit more away from what you want to do. You'll find that you have less ideas because you're unable to connect the dots in a similar way to when you're taking a shower. And you'll find that you think about the future less often too. And so there's the connection between the horse and our focus. We don't unfocus enough. And whatever your strategy is, one of my favorite things to do each morning is to have some tea while letting my mind wander and just enjoy the cup of tea. Because how often do we just enjoy one thing? No cup of tea or a cup of coffee will be as delicious as the one that you focus on 100%, with 100% of your attention. No meal will be as delicious as the one you focus on with 100% of your attention. No conversation will be as meaningful as the one you focus on with 100% of your attention. But the ones that don't consume your full attention naturally, your attention will work in rhythms when you do something habitual between focusing on that thing and wandering a little bit. But let it wander, because it goes to some marvelous places.
yes, not unlike the horror of not using a mechanical keyboard, it'll just be less of a positive experience. I think one of the phenomenon, or just as somebody is going through this book, you're going to become very self-aware of how many distractions you have in your world.
Mhm.
So, for instance, 2 nights ago, listen to the audiobook. I'm running, it's dark, And as I'm listening to that chapter 0.5, where you're kind of coaching us on here's how you can actually focus on reading this book about having focus. As I'm running, uh, I'm getting emails, my smartwatch is buzzing and flashing up messages across
Yeah.
it, and just all. I'm just like, and the reason I'm out here running at night is it's a time I can do it when I'm pretty much distraction free. The reason I'm listening to an audiobook is because I don't have enough time to read and I'm just too busy. And yet, even though this is like a time I can actually focus and pay attention, I've got alarm bells and buzzing going off all over me trying to distract me. So I felt like that
Yeah.
was very ironic.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these things we know on some level to be true, but it's that we don't step back from the way that we act and the way that we think and the way that we work and the way that we live our life to consider these ideas in the first place. And so, it really is a book in that way about awareness and on some level mindfulness. As aversive as some of us find that topic, it's really just noticing what your mind is full of, where your attention is at in any one moment. And in any one moment, we're either focusing on something on autopilot mode where our world has control over our attention. Our phone tells us what to focus on. And, our phone has this wonderful way of making things feel more important than they actually are, because when we get a notification or a vibration from something, in the moment, nothing will feel more pressing than that thing. And so it tricks us into thinking that text messages are important, and email are more important than what we're doing in front of us, than the run we're going on, than the book that we're listening to. And so I think it's something to reclaim. And a question that's worth reflecting on is, what percentage of the day would you say that you have control over your attention? And like really think about a number. Like, don't just kind of gloss it. Like, if you had to really think, what percent of the day would you have control over your attention? Whenever I ask somebody, the average number that they tell me is about a third of the day they have control over their attention. The rest of the time, maybe they're sitting in front of a computer, and then that guides them through focusing on things through notifications and using their email inbox as a to-do list, or they're rushing through their family life, just kind of like dealing with what's latest and loudest and most urgent. And not that we can have control over our attention 100% of the time. We need to keep our head above water in these ways, but we don't have 0% control of our attention either. And so I think it's really something worth reclaiming. But I have a question related to is it weird speaking now because you just listened to my voice for like 7 hours?
No, not really. I
No?
what's always intriguing to me. So, when I meet people who've been listening to my podcast for a long time, like for the first time, a lot of times they feel very like they act like they're super familiar with you and like you're just like they know
Mm.
you. And like I went to Podcast Movement 2-3 years ago, and some of the keynote speakers were podcasters who I've like listened to their whole catalog,
Oh,
every episode, and I've heard hundreds of
yeah.
hours of them speaking. And so to walk into a ballroom and hear them talk, I felt like I was listening to a longtime friend because they'd spoken to me for
Huh.
several hundred hours. So it is kind of interesting. Like so, I've experienced where I feel like I know somebody a little bit because I've heard them and know their voice, and you get to go know their tonality a bit and how they
Yeah.
just the rhythm of their speaking. So yeah, no, it probably would feel more weird if I hadn't listened to the audiobook. Like you felt
Mm.
more familiar out of the gate, I would say.
Oh, so it's a sense of familiarity rather than,
Right.
an audiobook coming to life almost.
Yeah, and I love it
Mm.
when authors read the audiobook. I mean, it's
Yeah.
fine to have a narrator, and hey, sometimes people just aren't great public speakers, and you
Especially
don't.
if they're British.
Yeah. And if you don't want to invest, $10,000 in editing, I totally get why you would use a narrator sometimes. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's always fun to have an author read it because they bring something out of the book and reading it themselves that only the author can bring to life, in my opinion.
If they wrote it. Because a lot of books are ghostwritten, and so you have
Don't tell anybody that. Come on.
I think like half of the books out there, like celebrity bios. You think celebrities have time to write these bios of themselves? You think like all these politicians have time to write books about themselves. No, but they like it's their ideas, it's their thoughts, but it's just they're spoken to the ghostwriter out of over the course of 10 or 20 conversations with them, and out of that comes a book. And so like I can kind of tell if somebody wrote a book when they're reading the audiobook, because they struggle with a few words, it's not natural for them. But when somebody writes in that kind of conversational tone, it's always, I don't know if this came across in the audiobook, but I recorded the audiobook. My publisher hooked me up with a studio in Toronto where Drake recorded many albums. Drizzy, Justin Bieber recorded a couple of albums there. Uptown Funk was recorded in that same studio. So I don't know if this came across, but I wanted to mention that as a sort of humble brag/brag.
Well, they clearly they knew what they needed to put on the table with picking the very best studio they could have you record in. This is like the most random talk I've had this week. I love it.
It's good. Oh, I just heard a notification coming.
I know. Sorry, that's Messenger on my computer. It's dinging. One of the statistics or
irreverent is the word, right?
What's that?
Irreverent, is that the word that you would use? That's the word where it's like kind of off topic and interesting.
Yeah.
Would that word use? Yeah.
Yeah, that could work. That could work in that case. So as a old school tech guy nerd, one of the pieces of information I loved from early on in the book, you talk about how our brain receives 11 million bits of information in the form of sensory experiences each second, but the mind can only process 40 bits. And so I was thinking about that as like, so there's 8 bits in a byte. So I can process 5 bytes of information a second, but there's that was just kind of like really when I think of how much information 5 bytes actually is, that's not a lot to focus on.
No, it's really not. I don't. I have to full disclosure that I think the ratio there matters more than the actual kind of measurement, because I tried to dig into it and follow up with the researcher, but I couldn't get to the bottom of what he determined a byte to be or a bit to be. But it's absolutely fascinating. Like if you close your eyes at any one moment, if you're not driving or recording a podcast, and then you try to describe your environment around you, the colors, the shapes around you. If you're not in your regular office, you won't be able to describe much of it. If it's a scene that you're not familiar with, you kind of get the gist of it, but you can't really describe what your environment is like. And this is not counting the thoughts in our own mind that we could direct our focus on. And so it really is fascinating that we're essentially sipping from a fire hose in any one moment with regard to the information that we can focus on. And so our attention is limited in how much we can take in for our mind to process, but our attention is also limited in how much we can process on the fly. So the latest research shows that on average, we can hold about 3 or 4 unique chunks of information in our attentional space, which is the word that I use in the book to refer to our working memory capacity. It's a friendlier term, at once. So 3 to 4 unique chunks of information. And so you look at the world and you see that it's structured around this unique attentional limit. If you're saying your phone number to somebody, I don't say, Shaun, my phone number is, 1,613,808,808. I'll say it's like 1-613-898. In chunks of 3 and 4, because in this way you can process it on the fly. Security codes are often, we can at max hold about 7 things in our minds, so 7 unique digits, nothing else though. And so you'll find that security codes, when you like have 2-factor authentication turned on for something, they'll text you a code, and it's usually 4, 5, 6, 7, but no more than 7 digits long. And if it is, it's broken down with dashes, much like the phone numbers that we have to process. And you'll find that, as you're typing in the code, maybe you have to go back and check it once more after you've reached 3 or 4 digits in. And so it's this fascinating attentional limit, but it's not big. 3 or 4 unique chunks of information. It's not a lot in the moment. And so, this is what, the fascinating thing about writing the book, is discovering not only, what we can do to focus a bit deeper, but what we can do to focus a bit longer. And so it's this fascinating thing about writing the book is discovering not only, what we can do to focus a bit deeper, but what we can do to focus a bit longer. And so it's this fascinating thing about writing the book is discovering not only, what we can do to focus a bit deeper, but why our attention is so limited and how those limitations manifest themselves in our daily life, in our culture. Three is a fascinating number. Three is about the limit that everybody can hold in their mind at once. And you look around and you see examples of this in our culture: the three little bears, the three blind mice, the three little pigs, the three musketeers, the three wise. And so we have sayings as well, like "good things come in threes," and "celebrities die in threes," and "the third time's the charm," because we look at the world and we group it together in threes. We divide stories into threes, with stories just a ton of things that happen one after another. We award three Olympic medals. We play rock, paper, scissors. There are so many more examples. It's fascinating how limited our attention is, which makes defending it so critical, but also increasing the quality of our attention critical as well.
Well, and speaking of threes, you give us a rule of three in the book. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Yeah, so this will be a fun, practical note to end things on. Is at the start of the day, fast forward to the end of the day in your head, and you ask yourself, what three things will I want to have accomplished by the time that this day is done? And so you focus on not just like things you have to do. Maybe a couple of them are, but there are things you want to be different in the world because you lived a day of your life. And so the idea is that when your mind wanders a bit, when you're kind of looking around the office, you'll see these three things that you wrote down on the whiteboard in your office, on a piece of paper in front of you. When your mind wanders, you won't remember a laundry list of things that you have to do, but you can remember three things because it's a number that fits comfortably into your attentional space. And so every day I set three intentions. Every week I set three intentions, and you don't always achieve them because emergencies come up and situations arise. But it's a wonderful, wonderful way of prioritizing what's on your plate. So you decide what you do, but at the same time you decide what you don't do. So my three intentions today: one is to write for 60 hyper-focused minutes, a couple of articles. The second one is to have fun in three interviews that I have today. And the third is to move my website over to a new host and to initiate that process. And so, I'll do these things by the time the day's done. I'll have a to-do list as well, which will capture the minutia of what I have to get done. But these are things that feed into the weekly priorities that I have, which feed into the yearly priorities as well.
And in terms of your two books, if people were to read them in a particular order, I was thinking, would it make sense for them to start with this one before jumping into the productivity project? Would that aid them if they're able to be more hyper focused, reading
Yeah.
backwards, so to speak?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like you'll be able to reverse chronological order. Yeah, you'll be able to focus better on the second book. But and I think this idea that the quality of our attention determines the quality of our life. It's so critical, and so I think it's more of kind of like an urgent message that I think really really needs to get out there. And so, frankly, I'd be honored if somebody picked up one of the books. But if you're going to tackle them in a certain order, I would begin with Hyperfocus if I were to read them, and then go backward to the Productivity Project, which is kind of a buffet of productivity tactics that 25 of them that somebody can integrate into her or his life.
And that's kind of a fascinating thing, because I think of so many of the authors I've talked to, they'll write one book and then they'll do a follow-up book, and they will often either say, "Well, you should read my second book first," or "I almost wish I'd written this second book before these." So anyways, just random side comment, but
Yeah, I think it's because like that's the current thing that they're promoting, and like they want to just just promote the latest thing
that's
and
the
move
real
on to the
secret.
first thing.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, that's the real reason. But like I think people actually should read them in this order because it's I think it would be a more helpful order, because like what's the purpose of reading a productivity book if not to help yourself get more done? And I think it's a more helpful and urgent message.
Well, Chris, most important thing to wrap up with: if people want to connect with you and find out more, where are some of the places they can find you on the web?
Yes, I'm on a few places on the internets. The hyperfocusbook.com is the book website. I actually totally forgot about that website before you mentioned it, until you mentioned it at the top of the show, when we were just chatting before. But my site is also called alifeofproductivity.com, where I write a semi-weekly column about productivity in a little bit of a break right now as I travel around and do talks about the book and interviews and stuff like that. Yeah, those are the couple places that the book is called Hyperfocus: How to Be More Productive in a World of Distraction. It's in books everywhere, bookstores everywhere. And you can pick it up wherever books are sold, or audiobooks are sold if you like the sound of my voice. And if you don't like the sound of my voice, there's the physical book as well.
Well, thanks for giving us lots of formats to consume your information in. Like we do with every episode, we'll have detailed links in the show notes, places where you can connect with Chris and pick up your own copy of the book. So head on over to ShaunTabatt.com. We'll have that all linked up for you there. It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Chris Bailey. Once again, our book today was Hyperfocus. And again, if you want to connect with Chris and find out more about the book, a good place to start is going to be the book's website, which once again is at hyperfocusbook.com. And Chris, I just want to say thanks so much for sharing with us today. It's been a great pleasure and an honor to have you on the show.
An honor for me as well. Thank you so much for having me.